Billy always felt a shiver run down his spine whenever he saw the milk. It was an odd sensation, one that he couldn't quite explain. The feeling was almost as if the milk itself held some kind of power over him, a power that made him uneasy. It wasn't the milk itself, it was the glass. The glass had an aura, a presence that seemed to fill the room whenever it was out in the open. The glass was old, with strange symbols etched into its side. Symbols that looked ancient, almost mystical. They seemed to tell a story, one that Billy couldn't understand but felt deep in his bones. He found it in his attic, hidden in a dusty chest. The chest itself was covered in cobwebs and dust, as if it hadn't been touched in years. It was almost as if the chest was hiding something, something that didn't want to be found. He knew he shouldn't use it. His mom warned him. She had always been cautious about the attic, telling him stories of old family heirlooms that were better left alone. "That glass is trouble," she said, her voice hushed. Her eyes were filled with a seriousness that Billy rarely saw. It was as if she knew something he didn't, something that scared her. But he was thirsty, and it was the only clean one left. The other glasses were either dirty or broken, and he didn't have the patience to wash one. He poured the milk cautiously, his hand trembling slightly. The milk seemed to flow slower than usual, almost as if it was reluctant to enter the glass. As he brought the glass to his lips, he thought he saw the symbols glow, a faint, eerie light that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. He quickly dismissed it as a trick of the light. After all, he was just thirsty. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. That night, Billy woke to a strange sound. It was a soft whisper, barely audible. He sat up in bed, his heart pounding. The whisper grew louder, seeming to come from the glass on his nightstand. He stared at the glass, mesmerized and terrified. The symbols were glowing again, this time brighter. They swirled and pulsed, casting eerie shadows on the wall. The whisper grew into a low voice, chanting in a language he didn't understand. He wanted to scream, to cover his ears, but he couldn't move. He was frozen in fear. The next morning, Billy woke up feeling drained, as if something had sucked the energy out of him. He looked at the glass. The milk was gone. He hadn't drunk it. Had he? He couldn't remember. He tried to tell his mom about the whispers, the glowing symbols, the missing milk. But the words caught in his throat. How could he explain? She wouldn't understand. That night, the same thing happened. The whispering, the glowing, the empty glass in the morning. Billy was terrified. He knew something was wrong. This was more than just an old glass. It was something sinister. Section 4. The Chilling Truth. Days turned into a blurry torment, each one blending into the next, a relentless cycle of fear and confusion. Billy grew weaker, his sleep plagued by nightmares of swirling symbols and chanting voices. Every night, the visions became more vivid, more terrifying. He couldn't take it anymore. The constant dread was consuming him, leaving him a shadow of his former self. He had to find out what the symbols meant, what the glass wanted. Desperation drove him to seek answers, no matter the cost. He snuck into the attic, back to the old chest. The air was thick with dust, and the wooden floorboards creaked under his weight. Rummaging through the dusty items, he found a small, leather-bound book. It looked ancient, its cover worn and fragile. Its pages were filled with strange symbols, the same ones etched on the glass. The ink seemed to pulse with a life of its own. He recognized a word. Golgot. It stood out, almost glowing on the page. It was a name, a dark and powerful name. The very sight of it sent chills down his spine. The book described Golgot, an entity trapped within the glass, feeding on the life force of anyone who dared to drink from it. The more he read, the more he realized the danger he was in. The entity was ancient, malevolent, and it had chosen him as its next victim. Section 5. Trapped. Billy's blood ran cold. He was trapped, bound to the glass by his own curiosity and thirst. He had to get rid of it, but how? The book offered no answers, only warnings. That night, the voice from the glass was stronger, angrier. It demanded more. More of his energy, his life force. Billy knew what he had to do, even if it meant facing Golgot's wrath. Section 6. One last gulp. The room was dimly lit, shadows dancing on the walls as the antique clock ticked away the seconds. An old book lay open, its pages yellowed with age, revealing a chapter that seemed to hold the weight of centuries. He poured a fresh glass of milk, the liquid cascading smoothly into the glass, its surface reflecting the dim light of the room. His hand shook so badly that he spilled some on the table. the milk spreading across the wooden surface like a creeping shadow. He watched in horror as the spilled milk turned black, sizzling and smoking on the wood, the acrid smell filling the room and making his stomach churn. He took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest, and brought the glass to his lips, the cool surface pressing against his trembling mouth. He could feel the darkness watching him, waiting with a palpable sense of anticipation, the shadows in the room seeming to grow thicker and more oppressive. He closed his eyes and drank, not a slow sip, but a long, desperate gulp, draining the entire glass in one go, the liquid burning as it went down. He waited for the burn, the pain, the feeling of his life force draining away, but there was nothing. He opened his eyes, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. The glass was in his hand, empty, the last drops clinging to the sides like tears. And for the first time, he saw his reflection in its depths, the glass acting as a dark, twisted mirror. But it wasn't his face staring back at him. The reflection was distorted, twisted, as if the glass itself was warping reality. It was the face of Golgot, twisted and triumphant, a demonic visage that seemed to mock him from the depths of the glass, its eyes burning with malevolent glee.